Olivia never imagined her life would take such an unexpected turn. A small-town girl with big dreams, she had always been cautious, keeping to herself and focusing on her studies. Being a virgin at 23 wasn't a choice for her. It was simply a part of who she was. In a world obsessed with relationships and dating apps, she remained uninterested in the superficial connections that never seemed to lead anywhere real. Her life seemed simple, safe, and predictable. But all of that changed when she found herself at the launch party of a high-end luxury brand she had helped organize as part of her job as an event planner. It was a night of champagne, glimmering lights, and celebrities, all under the watchful eye of the brand's wealthy and influential owner Nicholas Caldwell. The billionaire businessman was known for his charm, wealth, and ability to make headlines. Olivia had only heard rumors about him, how he had made his fortune, how ruthless he could be, and how often he left a trail of broken hearts in his wake. At first, she thought she had no business being anywhere near him. But when he approached her at the bar, everything she thought she knew about herself and her life began to crumble. Olivia, right? His voice was smooth, his gaze intense. He towered over her, his expensive suit tailored perfectly to his frame. "I've heard great things about you. You did an incredible job organizing this event." Flustered, she smiled, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't every day a billionaire noticed her, let alone complimented her on her work. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her shyness. "I like that. You're different from the usual crowd." It was a simple comment, but it made her feel seen in a way that no one had before. They spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing: work, life, their mutual love for art, and even their hopes for the future. Nicholas was not what she expected. He was charming, but there was an underlying sadness in his eyes that intrigued her. Despite his immense wealth, there was a loneliness in him that he couldn't hide. As the evening went on, the attraction between them grew. The chemistry was undeniable. For a moment, Olivia felt like she could be herself around him. He wasn't a man who expected anything from her, at least not initially. She found herself laughing more than she had in a long time, and she couldn't help but be drawn to him. By the end of the night, Nicholas leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "Would you like to join me for a late-night drink?" he asked, his voice hushed. Caught up in the whirlwind, Olivia nodded without hesitation. She didn't want the night to end. A part of her also wanted to prove to herself that she could be more than the quiet, cautious girl she always was. She followed him to a private lounge in the hotel, where the music was softer and the lights dimmed just enough to create an intimate setting. What happened next was a blur. Olivia knew that she should have been more careful. She knew the risks, but in that moment, the connection with Nicholas felt so genuine that she didn't think twice. One drink turned into two. They talked more, laughed more, and when the evening finally reached its peak, they found themselves alone, tangled in the sheets of his lavish penthouse. It wasn't a mistake, not in the way Olivia saw it. She wasn't seeking validation. She wasn't trying to prove anything. But when the morning light crept through the windows, and the reality of what happened settled in, she realized that her life, her quiet, safe life, would never be the same again. The morning after was nothing like Olivia had imagined. As the sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Nicholas's penthouse, she slowly opened her eyes, trying to piece together the events of the night before. The sheets felt warm against her skin, and the faint scent of his cologne still lingered in the air. For a moment, she convinced herself that maybe it had all been a dream, an incredibly vivid and beautiful dream. But as she turned over, she saw Nicholas sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand rubbing his temples as if he too was trying to remember what had happened. The silence between them was thick, filled with an awkwardness that neither of them had expected. Olivia sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her. She felt exposed, vulnerably. She had just given away something she hadn't even fully understood herself. "Olivia." Nicholas's voice was low, his eyes darting to hers briefly before looking away. "About last night." She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to tell him it was a mistake, that they shouldn't have let things go so far. But another part of her, the part that had been craving this kind of attention, this kind of connection, wanted to believe that maybe it wasn't as big a deal as she was making it out to be. "Yeah," she finally said, her voice shaky. "It was a lot to process." He nodded, standing up and pacing across the room. "I wasn't expecting things to get so complicated." His voice was tinged with regret, but also with something else she couldn't quite place. He seemed distant, almost detached, as if he was already preparing himself for the fallout. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, wishing she could disappear into the fabric of the blanket. She had always been careful, always cautious about protecting herself, both emotionally and physically. And now, with the memories of last night haunting her, she wondered if that was even possible anymore. Nicholas turned toward her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her feel small. "Look, I'm not here to complicate your life. Last night was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened, and I should have known better." Olivia's chest tightened. She had expected some form of regret, but hearing it from him made her feel like a fool. Was she just some conquest to him, a pretty face he could take home for the night? Before she could respond, he continued, his words cutting through her thoughts. "I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I did. But I'm not the kind of man who can offer you what you deserve. You deserve more than a quick fling." Her heart dropped. It was as if he had already made up his mind. He was already putting her in a box, labeling her as someone who would want more. And for some reason, that stung more than the words themselves. "Right," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I understand." Nicholas's face softened for a brief moment, but then he looked away again. "I don't want to hurt you," he added quietly, as though it was an afterthought. "I can't promise anything, but if you ever need anything financially, professionally, whatever it is, don't hesitate to ask. I can take care of you." Those words hit her harder than she expected. He was offering her money, a solution to make it all go away, but that wasn't what she wanted. She didn't need him to take care of her. She just wanted something real. She wanted the connection they had shared last night to mean something. Olivia stood up, her legs shaky as she grabbed her clothes. "I don't need your money, Nicholas. She stopped, realizing she didn't even know what she wanted. "I just need to go," she finished quietly, her voice breaking. She didn't want to cry, but the tears welled up anyway. She wasn't sure if it was because of him, or because of how he had made her feel so small. Either way, she didn't want him to see her break down. Before she could turn to leave, Nicholas stepped in front of her. "Olivia, wait." He reached out, his hand almost touching her shoulder. "Please don't leave like this. We can figure this out." But she shook her head. "No, I need to figure this out on my own. I don't want to be part of some messy situation that I can't control." She grabbed her bag and walked toward the door, her heart pounding. As she stepped out of his penthouse and into the cold hallway, the weight of the situation crashed down on her. The night had started out as something exciting and new, but now it felt like a mistake, and she had no idea what would happen next. A week had passed since that night at Nicholas's penthouse, and Olivia tried to convince herself that it was just a blip in her life, a one-time mistake, a story she could laugh about someday. She returned to her routine, throwing herself into her work with an almost obsessive focus, hoping that time would help her forget the way he had looked at her that morning, the cold distance in his eyes when he spoke. But every night, she found herself lying awake, replaying the events over and over again in her mind. The chemistry they shared, the way he made her feel seen and understood, it all felt so real. She wasn't just some casual fling. She knew that, or at least, she had wanted to believe it. It was a Thursday afternoon when her world turned upside down. Olivia was sitting at her desk, working through a stack of emails when her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code indicated that it was from a private line. A chill ran through her as she answered. "Olivia." The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Nicholas. Hey," she said, her voice tight. "What's up?" "I need to see you," he said, his tone more serious than she had ever heard it. "There's something we need to talk about." Her stomach tightened. What about? "I'll explain everything when I see you. It's important, please." She didn't want to get tangled up in whatever he was about to say, but deep down, she knew she had no choice. Something had shifted, and she had a sinking feeling that it had to do with her. She agreed to meet him, and within the hour, she found herself standing in front of his office building, looking up at the towering glass structure that seemed to mock her insignificant place in the world. Nicholas had always been a force, a man who had built an empire from the ground up, and Olivia, she was just a girl who had gotten caught in his orbit. As soon as she entered his office, Nicholas stood up from behind his desk, his face serious, even worried. "Olivia, please sit down." She did, slowly, still unsure of what was happening. He seemed on edge, almost uncomfortable in his own skin. "Okay, what's this about?" she asked, her voice shaky. Nicholas let out a long sigh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I've been trying to find the right words, but there's no easy way to say this." He paused, his gaze meeting hers. "You're pregnant." The word hit her like a punch to the gut. Pregnant? No, that couldn't be right. What? She shook her head in disbelief. "No, that's not possible. I mean, I'm sure I'm not." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "Olivia, I had you tested. I'm not asking you to believe me without evidence. I didn't want to believe it either, but the truth is, you're carrying my child." She felt the room spin, her breath catching in her throat. She had been careful, always. She had used protection, but in that moment, she realized that none of that mattered. One night, one mistake, and now her life had been turned upside down. "Why are you telling me this now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You could have, I know," he interrupted. "I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to respect your space. The last thing I wanted was to put pressure on you. But now, we have to deal with this. We have to decide what comes next." Olivia felt a surge of emotions: fear, confusion, anger, disbelief. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for any of it. "Do you want me to have it?" she asked, her voice shaking. She wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. "Because I don't know if I can, Nicholas. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this." Nicholas's expression softened, his hand coming to rest on the desk in front of him. "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to. I'm just letting you know that I'm here for you. If you want to keep the baby, I'll support you. If you don't, I'll be there for you too. But you don't have to make any decisions right away." She stared at him, feeling the weight of his words settle in. Part of her wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but she knew deep down that there was no running from this. The decision wasn't just about her anymore. It involved a life she wasn't ready to bring into the world, let alone with someone like him. "I need some time," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need to think." Nicholas nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need, but know that I'm here. I won't abandon you, Olivia." His words lingered in the air as she left his office, feeling more lost than ever. The reality of what she was facing hit her harder than anything before. The choices ahead weren't simple. They weren't clear. And all the while, one question echoed in her mind: what kind of future would she have with a billionaire like Nicholas Caldwell, who was offering support, but not love? Olivia spent the next few days in a daze. The reality of her situation weighed on her like a heavy cloud she couldn't shake off. She went through the motions of her daily life, going to work, meeting clients, attending events, yet none of it mattered. Her mind kept drifting back to that conversation with Nicholas, the pregnancy, his offer of support, the uncertainty that now defined every thought she had. She didn't know what to do. Every time she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a stranger. The woman staring back at her seemed so much older, burdened with a choice she wasn't ready to make. The thought of becoming a mother, especially in the chaotic world that Nicholas inhabited, terrified her. But then there was the other side of it: keeping the baby, raising it alone, and facing the stigma that might come with it. The shame she imagined from friends, family, and society for being that girl, the one who had been careless with a billionaire's child. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Megan. "Hey, you okay? You've been MIA for a few days. Call me." Olivia stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the message. Megan knew her well enough to sense when something was off, but Olivia wasn't ready to share this yet. She wasn't ready to speak the words aloud, let alone tell her best friend about the mess she had gotten herself into. The truth was, she had no idea who she was anymore. Before that night, Olivia had a clear sense of herself, what she wanted, what she believed in. But now, everything felt clouded by doubt. That evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, her phone rang again. This time, it was Nicholas. Her stomach tightened as she debated whether to pick up. Part of her wanted to ignore him, pretend like this never happened, but she knew that wasn't possible. He was right about one thing: there was no running away from it. "Olivia," his voice sounded through the phone, warm and familiar. It made her feel more vulnerable than she wanted to admit. "Have you had time to think about everything?" She sighed, her head leaning against the back of her couch. "I've been thinking non-stop," she admitted. "I don't know what to do, Nicholas. I'm not sure I'm ready to be a mother. And I definitely wasn't ready for this." "I understand," he said softly. "You're scared, and that's okay. I'm scared too." His words surprised her. Scared? Nicholas Caldwell, the man who controlled multi-million-dollar businesses, who lived a life of privilege and luxury, was scared. "You're scared?" she echoed, almost laughing. "Of course I am," he replied, his voice quieter now. "This isn't the future I imagined either. But that doesn't mean it's not worth trying. Look, I don't want you to make any decisions based on fear. You have options, and I'll support whatever you choose. But I want you to know something." He paused for a long time, and when he spoke again, his words were deliberate, heavy. "If you choose to keep the baby, I'll be here for you. I want to be involved, Olivia. I want to be a father." She felt her breath catch in her throat. Part of her wanted to tell him that she didn't need him. She could raise this baby on her own. But the reality was, the child she carried was part of him too, and that complicated everything. "I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of responsibility," she said, her voice shaking. "And I don't know what kind of future this child will have with us, with you. You're not exactly someone who makes promises easily." Nicholas's silence stretched for a moment before he responded, his tone more serious than before. "I get it. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I'm offering you something real, Olivia. A chance to do this together, if that's what you want." She closed her eyes, trying to picture a future where she wasn't alone in this. She wasn't naive enough to think that Nicholas's life, his world, would be easy to navigate. But the idea of raising a child with him, of sharing this responsibility, scared her even more. What kind of man would he be as a father? Could she trust him to be there, or would he disappear when things got tough? "I need time," she said finally. "I need to figure out what I want, but I promise I'll think about it. I'll consider everything." "That's all I can ask for," he replied. "I'll give you space. Just know that I'm here when you're ready." She hung up, her heart heavy. There were too many unanswered questions. But the one thing that was certain now was that her life had irrevocably changed. Whether or not she was ready for it, she was about to become a mother. And Nicholas was right about one thing: she wasn't alone in this. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of Olivia's decision began to wear on her. She threw herself back into her work, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the life growing inside her. Every conversation with clients, every event she attended, seemed to blur in the background. The only thing that felt real anymore was the constant reminder of her pregnancy, the slight nausea, the fatigue, the way her body had already begun to change. She was no longer the carefree woman who could make light of her life. Now, every step, every action felt tied to the future of this child, this unplanned, unwanted reminder of the night that had altered everything. Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Nicholas. "Have you thought more about what you want?" Olivia stared at the text for several moments, her thumb hovering over the screen. What did she want? How could she know when she didn't even know who she was anymore? She didn't want to hurt anyone. But the thought of raising a child in this world, especially in a world dominated by someone like Nicholas, felt suffocating. Nicholas had reached out several times in the past week, each message offering more reassurance, more promises of support. He didn't pressure her, but she could hear the uncertainty in his words. Maybe he thought she was still thinking things over. Maybe he wanted to believe there was a chance they could make this work. But Olivia couldn't imagine herself in his world. She had always dreamed of a simpler life, one where she could make a difference, not be part of a glittering, wealthy elite. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she resented the idea of everything being handed to her on a silver platter. Money and power weren't the answers to all of life's problems. She wanted something real. She wanted stability, but on her terms. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the ultrasound photo she had received a week earlier, Olivia made up her mind. She didn't know if she was ready for motherhood, but she was sure about one thing: she wasn't going to let this baby grow up in a life of uncertainty. The decision wasn't just about her anymore. It was about giving this child a chance at a life that wasn't defined by the chaos of her own fears and doubts. She needed to speak to Nicholas. Later that night, she found herself standing in front of his towering office building once again. The decision had come too quickly, but there was no turning back now. She had to face the consequences of everything that had happened. The only question left was whether she would tell him the truth that she wasn't sure she was ready to raise this child in his world, or if she could trust him enough to join her in the unknown territory ahead. Nicholas's secretary let her into his office without question. When he saw her, Nicholas stood up, his eyes searching hers. There was an unreadable expression on his face as he stepped toward her. "You came." His voice was soft, almost relieved. "I've thought about it a lot," Olivia began, her heart pounding in her chest. "And I think I want to keep the baby." Nicholas's face softened with emotion, but then something flickered behind his eyes. Was it doubt? Was it fear? "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady even though her stomach was in knots. "But I don't want your money, Nicholas. I don't want to be some part of your world that you think you can control. I want this child to have a chance at a normal life, and if that means raising them on my own, then that's what I'll do. I just need space, time, to figure out who I am now." Nicholas didn't say anything for a long time. He was silent, his jaw clenched as he processed her words. Olivia could almost see the gears turning in his head. He was calculating, considering, trying to come to terms with the reality of what was happening. Finally, he spoke. "You think I'm just offering money? You think that's all I can give? You?" Olivia flinched at his words. She wasn't trying to insult him. She just didn't want to be part of his world of excess. She didn't want to feel like a charity case. "I'm not saying that," she said quickly. "I'm just saying I need to do this on my own terms. I need to know I can do it without feeling like I owe anyone anything." Nicholas walked toward her, his expression softening as he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Olivia, you don't owe me anything, and I never meant to make you feel like you did. I want to be involved in this child's life. I don't want to force anything on you, but I need you to understand something." She met his gaze, her heart racing. "What?" "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I'm going to be a part of this child's life, whether you want me to be or not, and I'll respect your space. But I'll also be here when you're ready to figure this out together." His words hit her like a wave. Nicholas Caldwell, the man she thought would disappear into the background of her life, was standing here, offering more than she expected. But did she believe him? Did she want to believe him? She didn't know. She didn't have the answers. But one thing was clear: this wasn't going to be easy. As she left his office that night, her thoughts were still clouded with uncertainty. She had made a choice, but now the real battle was only just beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of doctor's appointments, sleepless nights, and internal debates. Olivia's body was changing, her emotions swinging between hope and fear. While the world outside seemed to continue on as if nothing had shifted, she found herself walking through life like an observer, unable to fully immerse herself in anything anymore. Nicholas didn't back down. Despite her hesitation, he kept his promise. He sent flowers, wrote messages, and checked in more often than she could handle. Sometimes she'd allow herself to soften in his presence, allowing herself to believe that maybe he meant everything he said. Other times she'd pull back, afraid of getting too close, afraid of trusting him. The hardest part, though, wasn't Nicholas. It was the overwhelming weight of what she was facing alone. She had always been self-sufficient, but now she couldn't help but feel like the ground beneath her was shifting. It wasn't just about her anymore. The little life inside her was growing, and with every passing day, the reality of her situation set in more and more. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, Olivia sank into her couch, staring blankly at the TV that wasn't even turned on. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Megan, her best friend, who had been growing more concerned. "By the day, Olivia, we need to talk. I'm worried about you. I haven't seen you in forever. Please, come over. I'm making dinner." Olivia stared at the message for a long time, her fingers hovering over the screen. Megan deserved to know the truth. She needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge her for the choices she was making, someone who could offer the kind of support she wasn't sure she was getting from anyone else. Nicholas was trying, but the truth was, Olivia didn't want to be a part of his world. She wanted a life that was hers, untouched by the riches, the expectations, the pressure. With a sigh, she typed back a response. "I'll be there in an hour." When Olivia arrived at Megan's apartment, she was greeted with a warm hug. The smell of her friend's homemade lasagna filled the air, making her stomach growl despite the fact that she had barely eaten all day. Meg didn't waste any time. "Okay, Spill," she said, sitting down at the table with her. Olivia hesitated, the weight of her secret pressing on her chest. Megan had always been there for her, but this was something she wasn't sure her friend could ever fully understand. "I'm pregnant," Olivia said quietly. her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. By Nicholas Caldwell. Megan's eyes widened. Wait, what? You're serious? As in, the Nicholas Caldwell, the billionaire? Olivia nodded, her eyes downcast. Yes. Megan's initial shock faded into concern. She reached across the table, taking Olivia's hand in hers. Okay, we're going to figure this out. But first tell me what's going on. Are you happy? Are you okay? Olivia bit her lip, fighting back tears. She hadn't realized just how much she needed someone to ask her that, to really ask her how she was doing. I don't know if I'm happy. I'm scared. I don't know what this means for my future. And I don't know if I can trust Nicholas. I don't want to be some trophy for him. I don't want to be a part of his world. But I also can't ignore the fact that this is his baby, too. Megan squeezed her hand. Olivia, you don't have to figure this out alone. You're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, I've got your back. But you need to decide for yourself, not for anyone else. Olivia's mind was a whirlwind. She was thankful for Megan's support, but the truth was, the choice she was facing wasn't something anyone could make for her. It was her decision alone. As Megan served dinner, the conversation shifted to other topics, but Olivia couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. She didn't want to be a part of the high society world that Nicholas seemed to live in, where everything was about appearances and money. But she also couldn't deny that the baby growing inside her was a part of him, too. That night, as Olivia lay in bed, she thought about the choice ahead of her. Could she really raise this child on her own? Could she trust Nicholas, even a little? She had spent so long resisting his world, resisting the temptation to fall for his promises. But now, with the reality of motherhood hanging over her, Olivia wasn't sure where she stood. She closed her eyes, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day. But sleep didn't come easily. The questions kept lingering in her mind. What kind of mother could she be? What kind of father would Nicholas make? Could they make this work together? Or would they be forever tied by a mistake that neither of them was ready to fully face? The next few days passed by in a blur. Olivia tried to bury herself in her work, but her mind was consumed with thoughts of the future. The baby, Nicholas, her life, it all felt like a tangled web she couldn't untangle. Every time she thought about making a decision, a new question arose, and the cycle started all over again. She couldn't ignore the fact that she was becoming more and more attached to Nicholas. Despite her best efforts to keep her distance, his calls, his texts, the thoughtful gestures, there was a tenderness in him that she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the cold, calculating billionaire that everyone thought he was. He was someone who cared. But was that enough? One morning, she found herself staring at the ultrasound picture once again. The baby was growing, and with each passing day, the weight of the situation became heavier. Olivia had always imagined a future full of freedom, traveling the world, pursuing her dreams, finding love on her own terms. But now, everything felt uncertain. She didn't know if she was ready for the responsibility. And more than that, she didn't know if she was ready for the complexities of being tied to Nicholas for the rest of her life. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down at the screen. It was from Nicholas. I've been thinking. The message read, let's talk about everything. When you're ready. She stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. He wasn't giving up. Despite her hesitation, despite the walls she had put up, he was still there, offering support. Part of her wanted to just say no, to close the door completely. But another part of her, one that she couldn't ignore, wanted to hear him out. After a few moments of indecision, she sent him a reply. Okay, let's meet. The next afternoon, Olivia found herself sitting across from Nicholas in a quiet cafe. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. He was dressed in his usual tailored suit, looking every bit the billionaire mogul he was. But this time, there was something different about him. His posture was less confident, his eyes filled with something that looked like uncertainty. Olivia, he began, his voice soft but firm. I know this is complicated. I know I haven't made things easier for you, but I want you to understand something. I'm not just here to be some financial support or a distant father. I want to be involved. I want to be a partner in this, if you'll let me. She looked down at her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly. I don't know if I can do that. I don't want to live in your world, Nicholas. I don't want to be tied to your empire, your lifestyle. I want a life that's simple, that's mine. Nicholas's gaze softened, but there was a quiet intensity behind his eyes. Olivia, I get it. You don't want my wealth or my influence, and I'm not asking you to be a part of my world. But the baby isn't just a part of me, it's a part of you too. And we have to figure this out together, one way or another. Olivia swallowed hard, trying to push down the wave of emotion rising in her chest. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't plan on being pregnant, let alone with you. Nicholas's eyes darkened slightly, but his voice remained calm. I didn't ask for this either. But here we are, and we can either run from it or face it head on. I'm not trying to control you, Olivia. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can be the father you need me to be. To prove that I can be there for you, for the baby. The silence between them stretched for a long moment as Olivia processed his words. Her heart ached, with confusion, with longing, with fear. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? I don't know, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't know what to do. Nicholas reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. The warmth of his touch sent a shock through her, but she didn't pull away. Olivia, he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. All I'm asking is for you to take a chance on me, a chance on us. Her heart thudded in her chest. She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe in him, but the fear of being hurt, of being disappointed, of losing herself in this complicated mess held her back. I need more time, she said quietly, pulling her hand away from his. I need to figure out who I am now, before I make any promises. Nicholas nodded, his expression unreadable. Take all the time you need, but know that when you're ready, I'll be here, no matter what. That night, Olivia sat in her apartment, staring out the window at the city lights below. The world felt so far away, so distant. The weight of the decision she had to make pressed down on her like a suffocating cloud. She didn't know if she was ready for the kind of life that was being offered to her. She didn't know if she could trust Nicholas, or if she could even trust herself. All she knew was that her life, her future, was no longer just hers. It was now tied to another life, a life that she would have to protect, nurture, and guide. And in the quiet of the night, as the uncertainty wrapped around her like a blanket, Olivia realized that the future she had once imagined for herself was gone. The choices she had to make now were bigger than anything she had ever faced before. A few days passed, and Olivia found herself in a place she had never imagined, standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out into an unknown future. The fear that had settled deep within her chest seemed to multiply with every passing minute. The baby, Nicholas, her life, none of it felt familiar. Everything had changed, and she couldn't quite grasp the shape of what her future would look like, but the one thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't keep running from it. Her conversation with Nicholas had stayed with her, turning in her mind like a puzzle she couldn't quite piece together. His words had been sincere, but were they enough? Could she trust him when he promised to be there for her, for the baby? She wasn't sure, but there was something about him, something real, something that pulled at her heart. She wanted to believe that there was more to him than the cold businessman people saw in the tabloids. She wanted to believe that he could be the man he said he would be, the father he promised to be. Yet, there was also a voice inside her, louder than ever, that reminded her of the life she had before, the life that was safe, independent, and free from the complex world that Nicholas inhabited. Could she truly embrace a future that involved him, or was she just fooling herself into believing in a dream that wasn't meant to be? The next day, she made a decision. It wasn't the decision to make everything perfect. Cliff wasn't even a decision that felt like it had an easy answer. But it was the decision to stop running, to stop avoiding the inevitable. She had to face it. She called Nicholas. I'm ready to talk, she said, her voice steady but her heart racing. About everything. That afternoon, they met at the same cafe where their conversation had begun. This time, Olivia came prepared, not with a clear answer, but with an open heart and mind. Nicholas was already there, waiting for her. He looked up as she approached, his eyes scanning her face before softening with what seemed like relief. Olivia, he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight. She hadn't expected. I've been waiting for you to come to this decision. She sat down across from him, taking a deep breath. I don't know what the future holds, Nicholas. I don't know if we'll be a perfect family, or if this will even work. But I do know that I don't want to go through this alone. I don't want to raise this child by myself. I need you whether or not you think you can handle it. I need to know that we're doing this together. His face softened, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia saw a glimpse of the man she had longed to believe in the man who wasn't just about wealth, status, or control. The man who was standing there, ready to face the consequences of their decisions. "I'm here, Olivia," he said, his voice firm with determination. "I'm here, and I'm ready. I know I'm not perfect, but I want to be the father you and the baby need. I want to do this right, for all of us." Olivia looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I don't know what that means, Nicholas. Why, I don't know if I can trust that this is real." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto hers. "I understand your fear. I've made mistakes, I've hurt people, but I want you to know, what we have here, what we're about to build, it's real. And I'm not going to let you down. You're not alone in this, Olivia. I'll be with you every step of the way." For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a flicker of hope, however small. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe they could make it work, but it wasn't going to be easy. It wouldn't be perfect. They would have to face obstacles, his world, her own insecurities, their differences, but she couldn't deny the connection that still pulsed between them, the way he was offering her his heart, even when everything seemed so uncertain. She nodded slowly, the weight of her decision settling into her chest. "Okay, let's do this, together." Nicholas's expression softened into a rare, genuine smile. "Together," he repeated, his voice quiet but filled with promise. "I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. I'm in this for the long haul." As she walked away from the cafe, her heart felt lighter, but not without a weight. She had made a choice. It wasn't the choice she had expected to make, and it wasn't a perfect choice, but it was the choice to step into the unknown, to build something together, to face the challenges ahead as a team. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Olivia felt like she had the strength to face whatever came her way. She didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. But maybe, just maybe, embracing the unknown was the key to finding the happiness she had longed for. And as she walked toward her new future, she felt Nicholas's words echo in her mind. Together,